Thank you. Delighted to have this opportunity to move the conversation forward on the next level in regard to this amazing tool called forgiveness that, when actually used, tends to disappear the world of conflict and have us functioning as human beings. It's like, how could it possibly get better than that? Functioning out of actual human life. And so the whole point of everything we talk about, everything we're moving toward is, how do I recognize what's false? How do I undo it? And how do I get to the truth of who I am as a human being? And how do I restore the energy flow throughout my structure so that I get to return to that truth of who I am? And so the core tool that we're working with is the tool of removal, the tool of forgiveness, the willingness to undo what never belonged within the structure. That is to face and undo everything that's based in anything other than love. And giving up all the reasons we have for doing those things. The mind, rationalize. If you break that word down, rationalize. The mind will rationalize any kind of behavior that you decide to do, and decision is different than choosing. There are two totally different actions there. One of them is the mind forcing something on us from the past simply because the content is there and it's resonated into activity. It's called a decision. And it can, be anything from the mundane to the insane and bizarre. If I say, don't think about the color of your car, what moves in your mind? Well, there's a thing called resonance. My voice sets up a frequency. It hits the speaker on the phone, sends it perhaps thousands of miles to get to you through several different stations, and resonates something in your mind. But what resonates in your mind is what's in your mind. And so don't think about the color of your car. Generally, through resonance, elicits something about the color of your car. That's not something you've chosen to think about. That's a decision. Choice is where we have the ability to introduce something into a mind that already has 1,000 reasons to be angry, to be negative, to be pissy, to do something other than function as love, to give up our human lives as though that's worthwhile. Of course, I'm getting a really powerful lesson in that, being here with Michael J. and Jamie, and having been with CJ a couple of days ago when she passed. And, basically we're packing her stuff up. And it's not the first time I've done that in my life. And what occurs is, what was this life really for? What was it really about? Was it this stuff that's now going to Goodwill or going to the trash or being burned or what have you? What is it really for? What is it really about? So many people spend so much time trying to accumulate that stuff and put it all in just the right place so that they can pretend that there's nothing inside of them that needs to be dealt with. But if our minds are capable of producing any form of hostility or fear, then there's something in our minds, no matter what the mind's reason is, it'll always have ration lies. It will always lie to us and, find something wrong with self or others to prove that I'm right and justified in using this set of words, this energy in my voice, this energy in my fist, or what have you. And when you realize that the only reason we ever do any of that sort of stuff is because we had a power person. And that power person dynamic has been going on for generations and generations and generations. Now, there's a great line in the Course in Miracles that says, your wholeness can never be really hidden in darkness, but you can deceive yourself about it. Truth about you. Go back to the moment where you were held as a newborn child, and everybody who held you knew exactly who you were. What happened to that self? What happened to that sweetness? What happened to that state of being? If our generational patterns, if our family system, if our culture instills darkness within us, then we can pretend that we're not that, and it's all a lie. And the greatest gift that you can give to yourself and another is to be aware of that about yourself, especially in the moments where your mind's got 1,000 reasons to condemn you, or to condemn someone else, or to play out the power person dynamic. So the only error here is an error in perception. In truth, darkness is just an absence. It's not a positive presence. You know, people say, I'm in a dark mood. Well, why are you in a dark mood? Oh, gee, there are thought disorders that block me from being aware of who I am as love. So I'm functioning out of those thought disorders. And if you fail to perceive the light that you are, then you get to believe that there's darkness. And those beliefs mean absolutely nothing. Yes, your mind's got a whole story. It's got 1,000 generations of stories about why it's justified and why it's the only option. But the truth is, they don't mean a thing. It's just a repeating of thoughts from the past, from what's been modeled for, you know, another lesson that I'm getting here with Kaylee Joe. You know, she's 5 months, and you want to talk about mimic. It's just awesome to watch. Whatever takes place, she's mimicking it. And so if we've identified with the thoughts that our power person or those who modeled behavior for us did, then we'll tend to take on that identity and play out of. Identification means that you make the perception, there's you and there's something outside of you, and you're going to choose that particular power person dynamic or power person behavior, but it's not a choice at all. It's just a decision. The challenge is to really bring choice, to bring the power of the spiritual being, the created essence of love that you are, into the space in your mind and choose. The Course says it beautifully, choose once again. Choose once again. And all of that is a battle going on in the mind. You know, you go back to Paul, he says, be transformed by the renewal of your mind. He knew. Now, unfortunately, he didn't know how. We have very powerful evidence of that because he says it in his own words. It's like he's saying, I know what I want to do, but why is it the things I would do, I cannot? And the things I hate, he says, are what I do. Have an understanding of how forgiveness worked, how to chip away at the energetic patterns held within his own mind. He knew the mind needed to be renewed, but he didn't know how to get to the unconscious part of the mind to clean it out, which is so precisely, powerfully, I don't even know what words to say, amazing that Yeshua taught exactly how to do that. So discomfort is a mental attitude of pushing back and forth from this state of being to this state of non-being. Truth is that all those thoughts that go into building the self that Yeshua said in order for you to live, you've got to die, have to be forgiven, have to be corrected. And it's not a work that most people want anything to do with. Oh, it sounds great. Everybody wants the result. But doing the gut level work, going inside and dealing with those things is a challenge. So when you recognize the truth about who you are, that you are part of this energy system called life, you know, in the ancient teachings they talked about the mystical body of Christ. That wasn't a religious idea. They were just saying that, okay, so you have a perceptual mind that's been trained to see things, so now you make things where things are not. You know, if you look at yourself in the mirror, if you could actually adjust the rate of vibration and actually see what's reflecting in the mirror, you'd see this whirring mass of electrons, protons, neutrons, and light. But you won't see that. You'll see a body. But there's no body there. What exists is this energy field designed to function, designed to be an expression of love, to bring the active presence of love and, as it were, pour it into the world. And go back to the Aramaic definition of the word prayer. Doesn't mean to put an order into the cosmic gift catalog. It means to, quite literally translated, would be to set a trap for God, to become the space energetically. The scientists are telling us we're moving through space at about 4,000 miles an hour. We seem like we're standing still. It doesn't appear that way. Our mind is adjusted to make this our norm. But what we know is when two fields that have a match with each other, an atomic magnetic match with each other, is there's an exchange of energy between them. So prayer, as opposed to telling the Creator what the Creator should be doing to, in its original Aramaic, is just, it's an everyday practical word that points to a state of being that's possible for us, where we function as and out of love. And the fact that we're moving at this speed through an energy field, we're also told in Him, in the creative field, we live, move, and have our being. Now, when you put those two together, the same way as when you start the engine on your car and you have an alternator, the fact that that alternator is moving through a magnetic field generates energy that keeps your battery charged, that keeps your lights going, that keeps your ignition firing. Motion and resonance create energy flow. So to set a trap for God means to become the space that, when properly aligned and properly oriented, knowing your purpose, you literally capture the energy of love that you're moving through high speed and with no effort whatsoever. It isn't something you have to effort. It's something, it's like the alternator doesn't have to say, oh, let me see if I can catch that magnetic field and stress and strain and effort it. It just moves through the field, and the exchange of energy happens naturally. Now, if we carry all kinds of power person dynamics of hostility, fear, rage, guilt, grief, shame, blame, condemnation, then those are the things that will move in us, and they're the things that will draw to us through resonance to play out. And each time it plays out, it's our opportunity to go, oh, is this part of my true nature? If I play out of this, what am I rejecting to do that? Oh, I'm rejecting functioning as a human being. I'm rejecting the very truth of who I am. And of course, the mind has all kinds of beliefs that will say, and here's the person I could pour it on. And sadly, oftentimes, that person is the one you look at in the mirror. So recognizing that your perfect natural state is wholeness. Many people talk about creating boundaries. Well, when you create boundaries, you create something artificial. It takes a lot of effort to keep that going. So all judgment is the process of holding on to energetic patterns from the past that are nothing but units of energy stored in the structure that reflect as constructs of the mind. Again, that idea of, in order for you to live, you've got to die. The self that holds the belief that they're separate from everybody and everything. And of course, the power person gave them some really, dandy thought disorders. And when they function of those thought disorders, of course, what happens? Well, it couldn't be mine. There's denial. Look what you made me feel. And now I dissociate from the very cause of what I'm feeling and can't correct it until I take ownership again. Every one of the tools is about how do I get back to taking ownership of that which I've dissociated from. In truth, there is one eternal, perfectly awake awareness of love. And to reject that is to destroy self. So our objective is to make these tools as universally available as possible and to dissolve from perception that which is based in hostility or fear, which means dissolve it from your energy field, which means these energetic patterns are dis-ease energies that reflect as dis-eases and ultimately, literally, reflect as aging in the so-called body. To return to the point where love is restored, and, the challenge, when you recognize that every thought you think, every feeling you feel, every reality you engage in is stored holographically in every cell in your structure, including the sperm and the egg, you realize that that's what you have in your structure. And it's so tempting to fall into that. That whole conversation about temptation, to fall out of awareness of self as love and to function out of something less than that. So when you make the choice to recognize, well, I only want what the Creator created for me. I only want what love created me out of and what love created me for, then you begin to perceive the constructs of your mind become something different. And appreciation, one of the big power person games on the planet is, what we shoulda, coulda had, what we want to have, which dampens totally and completely appreciation for what we already have. And, to me, it more and more occurs to me to recognize just what an amazing gift it is to have a human life. And, of course, there are 1,000 people around that will find a complaint and a reason why it's the pits. But, in all of, we look out into space in these telescopes and all of what we see, this is the only place we know of at this point where life exists. And we get to have one. How cool is that? And yet, with that possibility of recognizing and experiencing oneself as love, not dependent on the external circumstances. If your happiness depends on any person, place, thing, or event, you're in trouble. Because now what happens is somebody out there does something that resonates what you've dissociated from, and you tear yourself out of awareness and appreciation for who you are and what you have, and you get lost in that story, that generational story. That story is called the ego, and we're habitually caught up in that ego thought system. Then we only look at what our minds have made and how whatever the thought disorders are about myself or the people around me, I build pictures, I build a perceptual, I construct the whole world. Remember that lesson from the Course, what is the world? The world is false perception. It is born of error, and it doesn't leave its source. We say, oh, that person made me. Excuse me. That person brought up for me, but that person didn't make me. If I believe that that person made me that way, all of a sudden now I have no will. So the world is false perception. It is born of error, and the errors are thoughts, and it has not left its source. And, that particular lesson in the Course, and you go to our YouTube channel, just go to YouTube and type in Michael Ryce and look for the lesson, What is the World? We actually have a 2-hour video of it, our catalog, but there's a 30-minute presentation of it on the YouTube channel. It has not left its source. It will remain no longer. Here's the key to all the healing. It will remain no longer than the thought that gave it birth is cherished. And the thought may be 20 generations old, passed from generation to generation to generation. And when a power person is functioning out of some form of hostility or fear, and it usually is a parent, then the child has that thought already in their genes, so it's easy for it to be activated. And it takes over, and it destroys lives. It destroys the moments of sweetness and life that we could be having, and trades it in for, well, if only I could fix them, if only they'd be different, then I wouldn't have to feel this. But, sooner or later, As I like to say, you have to notice that you've been through it 87 different times with 42 different people. And I'm the only one that was there every time it happened to me, so maybe it's about me. Maybe I've got something to do with it. And there's the work of healing. And whatever thought we hold of darkness, it will appear in that world between our ears, the false perception. What is the world? The world is false perception. That's the only place we need to aim forgiveness, is at the world of false perception. We never need to forgive another for anything. In our minds, it seems like there are places that are light and there are places that are dark. The illusion of darkness is only maintained as long as you, light, refuse to look at it. So if you keep it hidden under the surface of the mind, then it will create appearances in your mind. And the unwillingness to simply bring it forward, embrace it, and be with it is what perpetuates it. We can only maintain the illusion that darkness is real by not looking at it, because the minute you look at it, light displaces what appears to be a presence called darkness, presence in that darkness. And this is a process that happens in the mind. And it's one that we don't have to do on our own. To remember what Yeshua taught about, there's this feminine elemental force in us called Ruka that is there to assist and support. And, the places where you value the darkness, by valuing it, you deny access to it, to that power that would undo it for you. She who undoes the effects of our errors and teaches us the truth. As long as I can say till the cow, I want to be finished, I want to be done with it, I want to be done, I want to be done. But as long as there's a part of my mind that says, well, I might get attacked tomorrow and I might need this, so I'm going to hold on to this piece of darkness. Then your mind will find 1,000 different places. There'll be a whole procession of people your whole life long that will contain the very darkness that you are most terrified by. Why is there's not a whole procession of people? The only place that procession of people exists is in the constructs of your mind. And when we let go of that, we start to realize that we are cells in one structure. The ancient teachings called that structure the mystical body of Christ. Nothing religious about it. That we are cells in one structure. But as long as we're living in perception, we experience ourselves as separate and separated from the rest. Albert Einstein says that's an optical delusion created by the mind. If you think you are separate or separated from the rest of humanity, Einstein says, you're living in an optical delusion. And those who live in an optical delusion feel the effects of their illusion. And therefore they become convinced it must be true because I've been feeling it forever. It must be so. And it's all based on a generational lie. It isn't so. So forgiveness accesses the dissociated part of the mind where those painful experiences are held, and yes, they will come forward. You will confront them, but if you are committed to staying connected to love, to the light, rather than falling prey to the darkness, then the darkness, because it is an illusion, dissipates and disappears. Nobody has ever invented a flash dark. A device where you push a little button and all the light goes out? We have a flashlight. Yeah, you push a little button and the darkness dissipates because the darkness is an absence. Fear, hate, grief, greed, hate, condemnation, gossip, slander, vengeance are all in the same realm. They are the absence of light. So when you open the veil of the temple, the barrier between your own subconscious and unconscious mind, and you allow what you thought was darkness to come forward, and you do that in the presence of love, then the darkness is dissipated. But if there are thought disorders you won't face, that you won't look at directly, square in the eye, or if there are thought disorders that are too painful to look at, or at least your mind tells you they're too painful to look at directly, then you'll keep having to make up a world of other people and put it into your brain's image of them. So it's a whole renovation of the mind, the renewal of the mind, as Paul talked about. And it creates a transformation. Break that word down. Transform. Trans, to go beyond form, to go beyond form, to get out of this picture, this false world that we've created, that we're all separate beings running around in separate chunks of flesh. Now, that's a pretty good appearance. You know, if you've ever looked at a hologram, I mean, we know that the hologram is just an intersection of light coming from different directions. But boy, does that hologram look real. Wow, look at it. There's a body, and there's a mirror, and there's a fan, and there's a TV, and all these things that seem so real. And we've settled in, you know, from the beginning. We had the authorities in our lives tell us those things were real. One of the things I often do with Aria, as we raise her, do our part in raising her, is to remind her, well, we call this a body, we call this a hand, but if you could look with your eyes, remember your hand is just something generated by your brain. If you could look with your eyes, you'd see this whirring mass of energy. It's not a physical thing. Well, but everybody believes it is. Well, okay, so everybody believes it is. Does that mean it's right? Let's listen to Einstein on this one again. Let's listen to, I think, a genius brain that pretty well everybody can honor and respect and go, or at least question themselves when they say, I'm conflicting with Einstein here, and I know better than Einstein. So here's what he says. On such things as matter, we have been all wrong. What we have heretofore called matter is energy, energy whose vibrations have become so lowered as to be perceptible to the senses. There is no matter. We do not live in a material world. Our eye, our brain makes up this material world. It's so much fun with Aria at 4 to get into any object of attention, and you know, she'll say, oh, let's see if we can find more realities. Oh, my reality, the reality my mind's putting out about that is this, and I've got a different one, and Jeannie's got a different one, and we made a game of it. So what we're teaching her about what we call the body, we're teaching her that, okay, so this is what we call it. We're teaching her geography. We've got a map of the world, and we say, and here's the United States. But guess what? There is no United States. It's a fiction. It's a helpful fiction, maybe sometimes, unless you're making war on somebody. But it's nothing but a fiction. There's no line between Mexico and the United States, or Mexico or Canada and the United States. It's a fantasy. The United States, America, Canada, Russia, it's all fantasy, all made up by men. Why? To do what? Create separation. And so we live and perceive in a world of separation, and it's hard to imagine that that's false. And it's hard to even talk about the truth, because everybody, you know, the truth of it, the actuality of it, because everybody's been so deeply brainwashed by the culture and the generational patterns of the family to believe those things are true. And, you know, the truth is we live in a world of make-believe. First you make it up, then you believe it, then you go out to produce evidence to show you that it's true. And you're right, it's true. It's not the truth, but it'll show up as a truth in your mind. Begin to suspect that when your mind is generating even the least little bit of hostility or fear, that your mind's not telling you the truth anymore, and you've not got a wedge to drive into its insanity and begin to shatter the insanity and make the space for the truth of incarnating as love and changing the whole game. And that's what every tool we teach is for, is to provide that support in recognizing who we are. So that's my game for today. How about you? What's on your mind? Anybody out there with a hand up in the phone queue, Jeannie, or Anything happening in the chat room?
Chat room's messed up again today. It's just spinning.
Ouch.
I've written to them I don't know how many times, but anyway, so there's nobody in the chat room, not even me. And there's no hands up. So we have 27 minutes. Oh, a hand just went up, and I believe it's Miss Susan,
Awesome.
610. You're on the air.
Okay.
Well,
Great
welcome.
talk, Michael.
Thank you.
Welcome home, almost.
Tomorrow morning at 11:30,
Boy.
I'm on an airplane, so you won't hear my voice live tomorrow.
Okay. Well, I can understand why. I have a question. Where do you fit in what Jesus said about, why callest thou me good? There's no one good but God.
Oh, it's just a simple truth. What he's acknowledging is, I'm not finished with my work yet. You know, the person who doesn't want to do their work wants someone to fix everything for them. You know, several times we talked about that particular passage in the scriptures where there are a group of disciples. And they ask him, and he answers them. He tells them, you know, there's work to be done. And their response is, too hard a saying, and they left. Right. And so those who would leave when they're told, I mean, when you start thinking about what's gone on in your bloodline and my bloodline, you think about the wars, the conflicts, the personal insanity, just the whole crazy game that non-humans have tended to play. And it's very appealing to go, oh, so I don't have to look in here and do my work. I can pretend there's one out there who's done it all, and he's just going to touch me with his finger, and then everything will be okay. That's a really appealing fantasy. Somebody else is going to take care of it. So when they called him that, you know, the perfect one, he said, well, why do you call me perfect? None of us is. None of us have finished our work. When you realize that there are 1,000 generations. You know, when I look at the story of him going into the Garden of Gethsemane, and the phrase is used to taking on the sins of the world, and that's interpreted as a suffering, terrible, horrible thing, when in fact what we see there is you've got a naturopath's hat on. From the naturopathic point of view, what you see is a healing crisis, and an extreme healing crisis in which if one were going to do, you know, a giant major piece of work from a naturopathic point of view, the healing crisis would look like sweating blood, and we're told that's what he did. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, up until there, what he's in essence saying is, I'm not finished yet. I'm still doing my work. So there's one who's perfect. There's one that you can connect with. And if you do, then you will be moving in the direction of your perfection. And ultimately, he says, be perfect. You know, do the work until you come to the point where you function as love, and every thought disorder from your structure and your generations and your culture has been healed. So he's just saying, I'm not done yet. That's how I would hear that.
That's good. That reminds me of something else. When he went into the desert for 40 days and 40 nights, he had to banish the bad guys, Satan's angels, before the good angels could come in. And so I don't know why that pops to mind when you're giving me your answer, but
it's perfect.
It's as if we have to clear the space for the angels to come in. There's no force there. Angels aren't going to swoop in and rescue us. They're going to come when we invite them, and we have to do certain things to get ready for them to come in.
And there's got to be...
Sorry, Michael, you cut out. Are you still there? Oh,
I'm here.
You're cutting out more. Yeah, you are.
Okay, is that better?
Take your microphone's loose.
Is that better? Have you got it?
Sounds
Hello?
better there. Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear us?
So let's put that in context of a piece of psychological research that came out of Harvard back about 60 or 70 years ago that I talk about all the time, and that is that In the lab, they hook a person up to electrodes and they're measuring brain cell firings. And in a time frame where they can measure 10,000 measurable units of electrical activity going on, so there's a whole lot of unconscious energy moving, the max amount of data that goes into conscious awareness is 9 bits.
Mm-hmm.
So we have this screen of projection, this screen where we have our perception occur, and it's a very tiny piece of, or there's only room for a tiny piece of what's going on in the overall structure at any given moment. So if one's locked into all sorts of hostility and fear, and that's what's moving in them, and that's what's filling the perceptual mind, then there isn't room for, and one proper interpretation of the word angel is a thought from the Creator, a thought from God. So if all kinds of hostility and fear are moving, and the screen of awareness is filled with that hostility or fear, how do you ever get out of that? How do you change that game? How do you get the angels in there? Well, Yeshua says it very succinctly in the Course in Miracles. Let go all the things you think you want, your trifling treasures put away, and leave a clean and open space within your mind for Christ to come, for the mind of love to come. Level. If I'm in the office on Tuesday morning and customer comes in raging and I rage back at them, there's no room for love to enter my mind. The demons have got me in that context or that kind of conversation. Mm-hmm. So how do I let go all the things you think you want? This to me is just so genius. You cancel the goal that's driving your mind to use your demons, to use your hostility and fear to create perception. You cancel that, you collapse that perception by canceling the goal, and now you've got a clean and open space within your mind where love can show up, and whatever has been opened in the unconscious with the quote-unquote demons, that is the thought disorders of the generations, whatever the perception is rooted in, by canceling the goal, when that perception collapses, that which is at the root of that pained perception, or that demonic perception, one might say, in that old language context, that energy now comes forward in the presence of active love. And in the presence of active love, it dissolves. Again, it's darkness, and it dissolves in the presence of the light. But if it's hidden under the surface, it can keep reappearing. If we never embrace it and deal with it, every time it's triggered into activity, it takes over and blocks awareness of the presence of love or light.
Well, it makes total sense that Jesus would be triggered into fear. He was facing his death and knew it. But he's basically saying what you just said is, I'm trying to clarify. When he went into the desert, he had work to do still. Those demons wouldn't have shown up. Okay. Whoa, precisely. That's so interesting.
That's what he went to do. And then he comes out and he confronts Peter, who, he wanted to bring a sword, and Yeshua gave him permission. Okay, bring one sword. All right. If you got to have one, go ahead. And then when Peter uses it to attack, if the world could just hear this one idea from Yeshua and accept it and live by it, the whole game would change in an instant. And that is, Peter, if you live by the sword, you will die by the sword. Now, it doesn't matter whether the sword is a nasty thought or an actual sword or a gun or a weapon or hate or fear or rage or guilt. It will kill you. It is an energy that when it goes into tissue that's made for love will cause pain and trauma. Now, we get warning signals. We get pain. Oh, gee. Oh, well, I'll go take a pill and I'll shut that pain down, rather than what's the thought? What's the energy here that I need to deal with? And then and teams of people around them that when that happens, it's safe to go, ooh, what's going on? I need support. I've got a piece of work to do, rather than look what you did to me. And when I stop responding out of those unconscious dynamics, and I recognize this, the sooner I can catch myself, the sooner I can become aware, the faster I can heal my diseases. But they ultimately, whatever perceptual disease there is a corresponding so-called physical disease, an expression of that energy in physiology, and it's just part of the warning system. You're saying, hey, here's something you need to deal with. Hostility or fear is like the early warning signal. A cancer is like, this is a deep, trying to get your attention kind of signal. Cancel the thought of it. And everything in between is just your structures telling you continuously what your creative process looks like. That's what emotions are. They're giving us a warning signal about what it is that we're creating in our lives and in our structures.
So interesting that when I use the tool, sometimes it gets me to a place where I can take a practical action that finishes the immediate problem. I'll give you the example of feeling resentment to the powers that be at my church because they have refused now to let Michael work with the refugees because he has a little dog the dog stays isolated in a carriage and he's never bothered anybody, and Michael's done a good job, and I was telling you about this. So I'm thinking, I feel badly. I feel like a victim. I feel like a victim on his behalf. I've got a lot of garbage going on about this. So I get to the point where I thought, I need more information. Because right now I wanted to strangle the one refugee woman who I think was the one who complained.
Ooh, strangle. Wow.
You know what
That's
I
pretty
mean?
strong. Mm-hmm.
It is
Yeah, been there, done that.
I mean, Okay. So I go in there and I ask around a bit, and one woman, she is like my angel, and she's done this before. I couldn't get any answers. I heard that there were complaints, plural, and it's cultural, and this and that. And finally, this woman comes into the kitchen, who's one of the volunteers, and she said, I know you're really upset about Michael, and he was wonderful here. But she said, I'll tell you, some of the refugees were refusing to eat the snacks because there was a dog in the kitchen. And it wasn't just one person. It was a lot of people. She said there are cultural things. They don't feel the same about dogs that we do in some cultures. I don't know which one it is. Arabic-speaking, maybe Muslim, I'm not sure. They're unclean, and they make other things unclean.
I didn't know that.
And so, yeah, it's very interesting. So suddenly this band across my chest.
That all makes sense now, doesn't it?
It does, but Michael, it took an outside person to finish the work. I wasn't going to be all
Isn't it nice
clear.
that all these angels appear?
I know. It was great, but it does make me think we are working in a huge fish tank connected, and that I also had to think about the fact that sometimes we're not able to do our stuff all by ourselves. We need help. We need those angels.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. 2,000%.
Can I add something?
Well,
Go for it, Jeanie.
You were talking about, needing to let go of the demons before the good angels could come in. You'll notice on the worksheet, too, like in step 5A, you have to cancel the goal first. You have to let go.
Exactly.
And then you can ask Ruka in 5B to assist. Spirit won't take over until you're willing to let go.
So I did, and I asked to be shown, but the shown was the woman. My interior showing didn't cut it. I gave up goals all over the place. But I get it, Jeanie. It's right in there in the worksheet. And great that it's in there. But, man, Michael, you said another thing in this talk you just gave about boundaries. And I've been thinking about boundaries. My daughter and I have been talking about the fact that Michael is still here. She says, Mom, I don't get it. I mean, how can you do that? And I say, well, we don't need the whole house. Our house isn't big, but we have this basement that's finished. And Jacob isn't down there right now. Nobody's down there. So we could do that. And if I had to get an assignment from God to do this, God was very good to me because this is a very easy customer. But she said, Mom, you've got to draw a line, and you always had kind of bad boundaries. Remember, you always used to bring people and put them in our attic in New Haven. We had a stream of, suddenly a whole family of Africans who were homeless in a family fire, and they came and lived in our attic for, gosh, the wife was there for weeks, and the father found another place because, I don't know, something about our dog. Maybe there it is. He didn't like our dog. Anyway, he said, Mom, you've got to set up some boundaries. And I'm thinking, I don't know even what she means. And I'm trying to look at codependence and stuff like that, but I have to have another talk with her. Anyway, but you mentioned boundaries, and you said something bad about boundaries. So say again what you were saying, if you don't mind.
Well, just that a boundary is I'm saying I want to draw a line. I want to separate here. Now, does that mean that I have to put up with every, terrible thing people do? No. I have every right to walk away. And the key becomes if I need to walk away, if I say, this is not how I choose to live, can I do that from a connected space of love? If I do, then walk away. And if I do it from a space of some form of hostility or fear, before I walk away, I better do my work around it, or I'm going to turn around and create it with somebody else. And what I've noticed over the years is that when we create it with somebody else, the intensity grows. It gets stronger and stronger and stronger.
Ew.
And so, does somebody have a right to divorce somebody and say, I don't want to live this way? Absolutely. Absolutely. But have I cleaned my end of the rope up? Or if I haven't, then I'm going to have to find somebody else to play it out with.
Michael, I wish you could have heard my youngest grandson on the phone this morning. He's one who's so well that I don't often talk to him because he's got his whole life. But he said, or I broke up with my girlfriend. And he said, I realized that I chose her because she was a lot like my dad, including the bad stuff.
Wow.
And I know. And I talked to him months ago when I visited about the power person dynamic. He said, remember when you were telling me about the power person dynamic? I realized that's what's happening here. And I was triggered to act like my dad against her, too. And we couldn't seem to fix it. So we had to break up. And I miss her, and I love her, but I can't have a relationship with her. And it hurts. But your work with these worksheets, Max has never done a worksheet, but it kind of trickles down. So he's getting the benefit of the tool.
Sit down with him and take him through a worksheet. What a gift.
I would, and I might. Yeah. Oh, he's a great boy.
I mean, for him to understand that, to come to that conclusion on his own, is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And
he's
so
brilliant.
Give him, he sounds like he'd be probably just ripe and ready for the tools.
Yeah, he is brilliant. He gets a lot of things. So anyway.
Very cool. Well, who knows? Maybe the reason he's here is to do that work. Maybe that's what his life is about.
Oh, maybe.
How many years has he been circling the earth?
18. 18.
Wow. What an age
college.
to get that insight.
I know. Yeah.
So the conversation I would love to have with him is, son, you really all, but things that she does that resonate things in you that cause you to withdraw your being as love. So it isn't about loving her, which for most people is approving of her. It's about you functioning as love, and when you can't, there's your work. She's giving you the gift. She's pointing to you to exactly what you need to forgive in you.
Yeah.
And so if you're interested, let's do that worksheet, and you might just find that whole reason to run away from someone that you feel a strong affinity toward will disappear.
Boy, that would be scary to him, because she was like his dad, so she would have to do the work too. I mean, maybe he could go back.
No, she doesn't have to do it. I mean, it's wonderful if somebody else, and if they won't, then that just means probably there's stubborn place in him where he needs another level of prodding to learn forgiveness. I say that from experience.
Yeah. Wow. For me to suggest to him that there's any remnant of hope for a relationship with her would be very upsetting.
Well, it would show him the upset parts of his mind. It would be his next piece of forgiveness to do. And that doesn't mean he needs to go back to that relationship. It just means that he has power person dynamics that he has practiced putting into his brain's image of her. And when he can collapse those, then, the game's going to change. It's like Jeanie likes to use the example of, playing a tug of war. You've heard her say that many times. And so if you're playing a tug of war, the game of war, tug of war, and you decide to drop your end of the rope, doesn't matter what that other person wants to do. Their game's got to change because you're not holding on to the rope.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
So
boy. Well,
I would frame it for him as an opportunity. Yeah, I'd frame it for him as an opportunity to heal the dynamics that he's not healed with his father.
Oh, definitely. And he is looking at that because he says, I don't want to just go into another relationship and do the same thing again. I don't want to pick a girl who's going to be like my dad again. I have to learn how to recognize the pattern. I said, boy, if you can do that. Jonathan did that years ago. He had a bad, negative pile of girlfriends, one after the other. Same thing kept happening. He said, Mom, I have to pick this girl from a different part of my mind, is how he put it. And I said, well, that sounds like a good idea. Well, he found a wife, and they've been together, and they're great. But there was a certain visceral attraction he had to this kind of girl. And he said, this girl doesn't have that kind of whatever it is, bite or whatever it is, but she's a wonderful woman. And I think I could grow to love her, but love for him meant being based on that type of person. He had to bypass that. That's really amazing.
Right. So I'm going to send you a link to the streaming of Healing Through Relationships. Is he there locally?
No, he's in Jacksonville.
Ah, okay. Well, then I would suggest sending this to him and inviting him to look at it, or
I will.
Perhaps
he's on
even,
week's vacation.
Perfect. Well, and perhaps even inviting this young lady to share it with him. There's one couple. You've likely been on the show when I've shared this before, but there was one couple who were doing this work over a period. She was actually very involved, came to an intensive. He was kind of out there on the periphery and wouldn't have much to do with it. And he finally did come and do one intensive reluctantly, and they just had a lot of conflict. They'd gotten together very young. There'd been some cheating in the relationship, blah, 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 blah. And they were divorcing. They had 3 kids. They literally had they contacted me after this happened. They literally had their bags packed, sitting waiting to be loaded in the car, and she said to him, would you just watch this video with me?
Oh, my God.
And they sat down on the spot and watched that video, and they were just back in full-blown cherishing each other and being with their kids and having an awesome time.
That is fabulous. That's good. Yeah, send me that link. That would be great.
I will.
And I can pass it on to him, and thanks.
Cool.
Whoa. All right.
Sweet. So that is on its way to you, and maybe the next thing to do would be to share with him a worksheet and see where it goes from there.
All right.
But it sounds like he has the perfect partner to show him exactly what he needs to work through, and if he works through it, then it's going to be delight for him.
Yeah. Okay.
Sent. And I just got this little sweet face of Kaylee Joe who's come to visit me. Hey, there's sweet
those
girl.
Photos, so cute. Those Facebook pictures are wonderful. Thanks, Michael. I'm checking my text. Here it is.
All right. It should be in your inbox.
It is. I see it.
Processing through it all. All right. Well, any other thoughts for you?
No, I ran out. I think that's it.
All right. Well, we have another hand up. It's area code 517. I think this might be Rex or Missy.
Yes, it is Rex. Hi, Jeanie and Michael.
Well, gee, haven't heard your voice in a long time. How you be, young man?
Well, I'm doing some deep healing and processing of the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies. Other than that, no big deal. Right?
Cool.
Yeah,
I hear in your voice there's some energy moving. It's a good thing.
Yeah, there's a lot happening. And I wanted to comment for the woman that just shared that sometimes when the young man says, yeah, this is my power person dynamic, which it sounds like it is, but he also wanted to identify one side of his power person dynamic. And I think that can be a hindrance at times, because what we're most aware of isn't very often the issue, right? And so I think it's important to be open to the other sides of it. I always thought it was, my power person dynamic as my dad. Well, then I came into play that my mom played a much more subtle role, that I was harder for me to see those variables in there. So I just wanted to mention that as well.
Yeah, we tend to have many power persons, all of us do, and
yes.
The key way to determine who the active power person is in any given circumstance is, whose behavior do I do when I'm under stress? That's where the real key lies. So looking at behavior, oftentimes it's not the person you thought at all. It was just that was just a distraction. So you're right on track with that.
Awesome. Great show. I really appreciate it. I know you got to close it out, but love you all.
All right. Blessings. Take care. So everybody, thank you for joining us today. Appreciate you. Lots of love and blessings, and have the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an awesome gift to give the world. Blessings. Bye-bye.